you, Wendy, and thank you, Karen, and hi, everybody. I was asked by Wendy and Karen to do sort of a part two of my August presentation about working with my spirit guide. And so I agreed after a little bit of arm twisting, and I'm kind of saying that because I'm just speaking about my own personal experience, and I do a lot of dream work. And it's through my dream work that my primary experience with my guide and my guide team has come about. And if you didn't see my my August presentation, I'm inviting you to go back and look at it at your leisure, but you won't need to have seen that in order to follow along today. Today I decided for part two, I'm going to tell what's essentially a love story. And so people are saying, wait a minute, Mike, I didn't come on for a love story. I came on to talk about guides. And I was thinking, well, it really is the ultimate love story. And this one has, woman meets man, woman pursues man, woman seduces man, woman and man encounter all kinds of drama and crises. And it's just like what we in the States call a romantic comedy, all's well that ends well when it ends. Having said that, I'll just refresh people's memory about my background and why I even got into this. Probably decades ago, I started having inklings of feelings of communication, but they were very kind of vague signs and different feelings that I would get. And then I went through a period of my life where I really started to ask myself a lot of questions about what I believed and what I didn't believe. And you could call it a midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it. I was really examining my Roman Catholic upbringing. But I think that upbringing kind of set me up to understand about spirit guides because, among other things, I had a very strong sense of a guardian angel and being able to pray, to ask for things, intervention from the saints. So that mindset was with me as I started to look into more of the spiritual literature. The other thing I am is an English major, and English majors, live and die by metaphor. And so I really think that metaphor is a great way to understand guide work, because really there's no way to know exactly what's happening. One thing stands for another. And if you can take the significance out of a metaphor and without worrying too much about whether or not it's literally true, then I think you really come away with some understanding, at least something to think about. So my background as an English major kind of served me well as I read about different encounters and experiences that other people had had. Then, of course, came the dream work, which is all metaphor. And in my dreams, this regular presence was coming through. And I have dreams like everybody has, the usual anxiety dreams, the usual house cleaning type dreams and all that stuff that all of us have. But I also have very significant, detailed dreams that I remember. I remember because it's clear they're trying to tell me stuff. And so that's how I met my guide, through my dream work. And so that kind of, I want to start sharing the screen. I hope this works. Just bear with me. That brings me to I only have a few slides, so don't get nervous. So my personal experience and the reason for my wanting to do this talk today is I really think that we hear a lot of things, and I have heard a lot of things, and I've read a lot of things. But the fact of the matter is, most of us will never write a book. And most of us, including me, don't have a psychic bone in our bodies. And most of us aren't very good at meditating, or we don't have the time to learn. Most of us want to go to conferences, but we probably won't. So where do we start? And I just got to thinking, it's not a matter of where we start. We can start wherever we want, start where we are. There's really no journey. There's really no path. We talk about being on a spiritual path. We talk about being on a spiritual journey, but it isn't. It's an infinite sea in which we all are. And as the Sufi mystic said, Llewellyn Vaughan Lee says, I love this quote, by the way, in the midst of an infinite sea, who's closer to the shore? So it's really our own personal experience that matters. And it starts with the intention to connect. And as time goes by, if we don't do anything else with that intention, we will eventually find that connection. The connection with our guides could be very, very subtle, as mine started out. It might be a bird that you see. It might be a dragonfly. It might be a glimmer of light in the corner. It could be anything, but it won't be any of those things without the intention. So I think that's really where all of this starts, is just with the intention to connect. And then I'm calling my presentation A Cast of Thousands, The Call of One, because what I want to explore and talk about, and I only have a few slides, as I said, so I'm kind of hoping we'll have a conversation about the fact that knowing our guides personally may not really even be optimal, let alone possible, because we really are supported by many, many, many people. We have our primary guide, we have our primary guide team, but the support that we get is that of really, really quite an incomprehensible number of spirit help. And so hence the title, A Cast of Thousands, The Call of One. That one call, of course, is the call of the one source. And then I just want us to remember that in this search, as we seek, I think it's really important to just accept that there's a lot we don't want to know. We need to surrender to mystery. I think that mystery, knowing, the more we know and the more we think we know, the more my experience through my dream work has shown me the less we probably do know. And I think there's a real power in contemplating mystery, and I'm going to come back to that later, but I included this other quote here from the Sufi poet that everybody celebrates and knows well, I'm sure, Rumi. Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment, he said. And then he went on to say, of course, that cleverness is opinion and bewilderment is intuition. So I think that that's good to remember in our quest to connect with our guide. And then I mentioned this is a love story. I think it's all a love story because it's, in my first presentation, in August, I talked about the concept of God. You say God in almost any context, and a lot of people get really nervous. I still like the term God, but you can use whatever term you want, source, spirit, whatever. It's this overwhelming sense of bliss and power and oneness, which I'm perfectly comfortable calling God, but in my traditional Roman Catholic background, we would embody a kind of a tyrant on a throne benign tyrant, but a tyrant nonetheless. I don't see God that way anymore. It's more of a power. It's the infinite sea, but it seeks us and we seek it. And it's is another Sufi concept, the concept of the lover and the beloved. Everything has two sides to it. And I think someone talked about that a few months ago, and that really resonated with me, and reminded me of this Sufi idea of the lover and the beloved and the ongoing dance between the two. So the mindfulness guru, Tara Brach, who, if you don't know Tara's work, you should look into what she does. She does a lot of teaching on mindfulness, and very, very wise and calm presence when she teaches. And she said, we enter this life and get lost and waylaid, and we forget a much more deep and vast and mysterious belonging. And what that made me think of when I saw her say that was, our guide teams are already there. We belong to them. They belong to us. They're already doing the work. We may or may not know who they are, but they're there and we belong to them. And I think that, again, we need to just remember that we have this mysterious belonging, and start with that intention, and many things happen from there. So I just wanted to share that quote with you because I just thought it was profound. So this is the amoeba with a memory. This is something that I borrowed actually from the doctoral dissertation of one Hugh Everett, who was doing a dissertation at Princeton. And his amoeba with a memory is actually a metaphor for the many worlds theory, which you can look up on your own if you want, but that's a quantum physics concept. But I'm borrowing it, with apologies to Dr. Everett, because I think it's a really good metaphor, and I want to stress metaphor. There's no cosmic amoeba. I'm not saying that. But I like the metaphor of, and for those of us who are English majors or are just a little rusty on our biology, our single cell biology, an amoeba is we call it a single celled creature that is obviously microscopic, and it is, reproduced by mitosis, which is asexual reproduction. And, that might, they just split, the one amoeba splits into an identical second amoeba. And so asexual reproduction may not sound very exciting to us, but, if you're amoeba, that's probably the most exciting thing that ever happened to you. But anyway, so I'm picturing in the infinite sea, we could have think about an amoeba and then the split into something identical, and you could call the first amoeba your higher self. If you want to, you could call it God, you could call it source, again, whatever you want to, consciousness. The second amoeba and the first amoeba are identical. Then the second amoeba separates by mitosis, and they're identical. And now, after you can see in the infinite sea with these number of amoebas doing what they do, pretty soon, where is the original amoeba? It's not there. They're all the original. So, like I say, you could call that your higher self. You could call it whatever you want. This is a metaphor for how we, I think, experience what we perceive as incarnation. And so I don't have, oh yeah, I do. Here is my cursor. So I want to start with this idea of being, just pure infinite being, and then differentiation down here. If your screen's too small to read all of these, whoops, sorry about that. I'll just read it to you. It's differentiation and then the small one at the bottom. sorry, is perception, and then the epiphany, and then we go back to the understanding of ourselves, the I am, the pure identity. And this cycle, for me, is really a nice and more understandable metaphor for what we might call reincarnation, because each time we go back to the I am and the amoeba splits again, there's another experience of differentiation and perception, and then the epiphany. And the epiphany really is what I'm going to wind up wanting to talk about. So with that model in mind, so I finally had this dream, my series of dreams, and I talked about this in my August presentation. I finally met my guide, who gave me her name, and it was a word from the Danai band of Athabascan tribal First Nation people from northern Canada, and it translated into arrow. So I call her Arrow. And I always had this, my whole growing up, I always had this feeling right down here, this little circle is where I was, down here in Connecticut. And this circle up here is where the Danai culture was, and still is actually, but it's a much smaller group of people now. But I had this feeling growing up that I just had this sense of like a compass pointing north. I was drawn there. And so when I had this dream about Arrow, it just seemed to really be an aha moment to me. Oh, that makes perfect sense. That's great. That's my spirit guide. And so I started getting really involved in the Danai culture. I did a lot of research and found out a lot about them that I really ended up really liking. I thought, oh, this is just the best guide I could ever have. The Danai band has a language structure that is very interesting to me, because of probably my linguistic background. But it's not a dead language. 13% of the population still speak the native Danai language. But they have gender neutral pronouns, and there's a lot less emphasis on the individual person, and more emphasis on the whole, the one, the group, and their relational nouns are all refer to kin, whether it's an aunt or an uncle or an extended cousin. They have the same word. So they all just relate to one another as family. And in fact, even their nouns referring to neighboring tribal peoples still had a sense of kin about it. So they even looked at outsiders as part of the one. And then they have a shamanic worldview, very close to nature, and a belief in the life force being in everything. And I just really like that. And in fact, their leaders are not just chiefs, but their leaders are shaman, and who are known in their language actually as dreamers. So I just thought that's terrific, and this group of people who are led by dreamers, and even women could be dreamers, and were and are. And so I thought, well, here's my guide. This is just gets better and better and better. And then the more I studied the culture, I understood that their children go through a rite of passage in which they go on a vision quest. Boys and girls at about puberty age go off into the wilderness, and when they come back after a few days, the shaman discerns that they now have a secret superpower. But here's the kicker. The shaman doesn't tell the person coming back from the vision quest what his or her superpower is. The shaman doesn't even know what the secret superpower is. And this just struck me when I learned it as such a testimony to the power of mystery, that we go on this vision quest and we come back with this power that we're imbued with, that even we don't know, but it's cherished by the whole group, that this person now has this superpower. So I was just head over heels in love with my guide. I thought, she's the greatest guide anyone could have. This is the greatest culture for spiritual growth. That's why I say it was a love story. She just brought me in, and I was hers. And I thought, I'm here on a mission, and she's guiding me, and this is, I'm just going to listen to everything she does and tells me. And then I went through this very, very difficult time where my father passed away. And 2 days before my father died, I was sitting alone at home on the couch early in the morning, having a cup of coffee. And I just got this strong, strong sense out of nowhere. This was not in a dream. I was sitting on the couch wide awake, of just overwhelming love, and everything was going to be okay. And I just knew that my father was fine, and I was fine. And 2 days later, he passed away. And I don't remember having any trouble. I felt my father's power even stronger in the year after he died. And Arrow was in my life in a way that she had never been during my waking life. I could feel her there. I could hear her. I could sense this touch on my left cheek. And she would say things to me. And that stayed with me and became such a part of my waking life that I was just a changed person for a year. And that got me through the death of my father. And then, this is just kind of a funny thing. I want to talk about this slide. I thought it was interesting that the logo from the tribe, the Danaiza, that you see here, I took off of their tribal website, is a dream catcher. So I thought that was interesting, that their shaman are known as dreamers, and they use that as their logo. So I'm putting this slide together, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes "Don't Fall in Love with a Dreamer," that song by Kim Carnes. And I wasn't planning on that being part of this slide. I was planning on talking a little bit more about the role of the Danaiza shaman, and what my experience with Arrow had been. And this is the way she works. She just kind of like stuck that in there. And she was reminding me of one of the dreams that I had that I think was just, for me, the kind of a crisis, and her trying to make a point to me. And now this was a dream. The experience I discussed of being on my couch just before my father died, that was a waking message, but this was a dream message. She came to me in a dream and said, "You are on your own. You need to make your own way. I will be here, but you have to go off and do it." And I was a mess. It was like she just cut me loose. I woke up, it was just terrifying. And I remember in the dream, I was crying. I was really upset. The interesting thing about the dream was, and some of the folks who are in Kim's dream circle with me, who are here today, may remember me talking about this. In the dream also was my wife. And although Arrow said I had to go off on my own, my wife was saying, I will be there with you. Don't worry. But I have to stay here for a minute and talk to Arrow about how to do this. So you go. So I walked away, and my wife stayed with Arrow, and they had a conversation, and I walked away blubbering. But anyway, I thought that was significant. So this is my last slide. I realized after that Arrow didn't leave me at all. And I realized that my wife is as much a part of my guide team as my guide, as are many other people who are both with me in spirit and physically. And since August, I've continued to deal with the fact that I lost my brother in April, and I lost my mother in May, and I lost a friend, good friend. So I'm deep into grief right now, and I've been dealing with the growing understanding that the whole purpose of our being here is that it's a vision quest. And we are not really alone, but we're out here trying to accomplish something that we agreed to. And we're supported by this cast of thousands, millions. It could be an infinite number. They're all there. They're there all the time. And we may be out there as if on our own, but we're here trying to have this epiphany that we're going to take back when we transition. And that epiphany is our superpower. And just one more thing about this slide before I end. The picture there on the right that says Arrow Road is another little funny thing she does. So I did the slide, and I thought the presentation was done. And then one day I stopped for gas. And as I was pumping gas in my car, I looked up, and I was at the corner of Arrow Road and Berlin Turnpike. So I just had to get out of the car and take that picture before I drove away, because I think she just kind of wanted me to know that she's just saying hi. So here's the picture that I want to leave everybody with. We're kind of like this young woman here riding along, carried on this wave of people who are all supporting us. This looks very joyful, by the way. And I don't mean to make it sound like all of life is joyful from this side. It's obviously hard. It's hard for me. A lot of people who are here today in this group, I know, are here seeking these groups out and this conversation out because of difficult things, which is all part of the vision quest. So I'm dealing with a very rough patch. I don't believe that it's all joyful, right, necessarily, but the point is joy in the end. So, yeah, I'm having a rough time. Other people have a rough time. And I take a very strong stance that you don't want to go up to people and say, who are having a rough time, and say, it's all about the discovery of joy, but it is. And so, this presentation, that's what I'm kind of learning through therapy. And somebody said, I think in this very group, said once, all endings are happy, but if it's not happy, then it's not the end. So I think the vision quest really is about joy, but it's not necessarily about that direct love affair with our guides. It's about knowing that they're there and that they're supporting us, and that we are out looking for our own unique epiphany. So that's my epiphany. and doing this presentation is also part of my therapy. So that's my last slide. I'm going to end and give back the screen to what I think is probably going to be me again. Yeah, there I am. And so I just wanted to go through all that with everybody as my personal experience and share it with you. And hopefully others have experiences that might be completely different from mine, but they'll be willing to talk about them. So that's my intent, is that people can just have a conversation about their own experiences trying to find their guide. That's all I got for now. If anybody has something they want to add, I'd love to hear other people's experience.